different, but all ended up resulting in the same outcome, a very happy family. We have Paul and Shane who did surrogacy in Thailand, and they have a very beautiful 8-year-old daughter, Molly, who's over there. She's 8 weeks, sorry. What did I say, Dave? So she's asleep, so I'll try not to wake her. They're going to start first talking about their journey. Then we've got Adam, who is, he and his partner David had a child, Maya, who is now 6 months old? 6 months. 6 months old, via altruistic surrogacy in New South Wales. Not a very common thing for gay men to have successful altruistic surrogacies. We're mainly doing commercial, so it's going to be interesting to hear Adam's story. And then we're going to hear from Giles, who is a bit of a pioneer in the surrogacy field. He's one of the earliest gay dads to have done surrogacy. He's got 4 children with his husband David from 3 successful surrogacies in the US, and he's going to take us through that journey. But we're first going to start off with Paul and Shane and make them welcome. Don't touch it out.
She likes noise, so it's all good. Well, basically we're here just a bit of a chat about surrogacy in Thailand. I guess how we made the choice and then our journey, which turned out a little bit different to what we expected from the start. I think we all had unrealistic expectations at the start, but then you start to hit reality pretty quickly of the journey or what it can be for you. And we're recently back, so only 8 weeks old. So we'll go over and talk about our journey a little bit, and then we can open it up. If you have any questions, we can answer those for you. Do you want to?
Yeah. So our journey began 2 years ago now, just over 2 years. We started with an agency who obviously works in Thailand, and we had 3 unsuccessful attempts with them, and 3 different egg donors at the same time as well. Then we moved across to a new agency, which is Talent IVF, who is here today. Yeah. And we transferred 2 of Shane's embryos and 2 of my embryos, and we fell successful with 1 egg, or 1 embryo, and little Molly was the result of that.
We started to get a bit anxious because we've done a few transfers. The first transfer hit us quite hard because we're actually the surrogate fell pregnant, so it was all good right up until the 6 week.
Heartbeat.
Yeah, and there was no heartbeat. We were quite devastated by that. We were quite shocked as well that we didn't realise that the process would be, you know, if we fell pregnant, we still were pregnant. I was shopping for baby clothes and telling people, so we wouldn't do that again. But from there, it did take quite a bit. So the agency we first started off with was a woman who was actually not actually in Thailand. She was from Australia, but she was actually Malaysia.
Yeah, she was affiliated
with Thailand, and that process, while it was disjointed, it didn't really work because of where she was located. And there's a few things that people don't take into consideration when they start thinking about surrogacy. It's, you know, for one, they should be in the country that that's doing the surrogacy, because the surrogates need to be looked after, and the process needs someone there on the ground, 24 basically, to make sure it goes smoothly. So make sure that we then quickly worked out that we weren't going to have agencies that were working for another agency or people representing an agency and all that sort of thing that can come with it. We were lucky enough when we first went over to to give us sperm and have it frozen, that we actually met Addie from Talent IVF, and she was in the hospital, and we got friendly with her. And after those failed attempts, we actually went with Addie, and through that process, we fell straight away. We've got to be anxious. We transferred 2 at the same time, 4 at the same time, sorry, but 2 surrogates. But we were lucky enough then for 1 egg to take with Molly. So, do you want to?
And then obviously once Molly was born, there's the administration side of things. Molly was in Thailand, or we were in Thailand, for just under 7 weeks when she was born. It was a little bit longer than I guess most couples spend in Thailand these days. The norm is about 4 weeks, but we hit a run of public holidays as a Thai New Year, Coronation Day, Labour Day, and also the Australian public holidays, so the embassies were closed when we needed them. So we're there just under 7 weeks all up.
Yeah.
But it was obviously nice nice experience to have Molly there, and not too many visitors, so it was time for us to bond with Molly. But of course, it was always nice to get home as well.
Yeah.
So, with the whole administration process, though, the agency we chose, which obviously was Addie, as we said, took care of everything. They held our hand the whole way, completed all the paperwork on our behalf, picked us up to go to the embassies. So you really want people who are working with you and there to support you the whole way, all the way up until you leave at the airport.
Yeah. The hospital that Molly was born in was amazing. So it was really blew us away how it was better than any hospital we've been in Australia, that's for sure. We're well looked after, and with Addie there, just going through the process with us, it become quite simplistic, and then we could worry about what we wanted to, and that was Molly, and not everything else that was going on around us, or worrying about money or paperwork or what have you. I guess when it comes down to it, the first thing is that most of you are probably thinking, where am I going to do surrogacy, or what's the best place to do it? We did do that whole circle. We looked at the US, we looked at the Ukraine, we looked at a lot of different options, we looked at family members, we looked at friends. It took quite some time for us to come to a decision where we were going to go, and after looking further into Thailand, it made sense for us financially for one, but that wasn't the only thing that was motivating us to go there. It turned out to be quite easy to get to and from. The time difference is 3 hours, so the communication was really good. Our first agency, it wasn't good at all, but when we ended up going to Thailand and ended up with Addie, the communication was good, so we were getting information straight away. As soon as there were scans, they were sent. We were kept updated each check for the surrogate. It was very important for us that the surrogate was looked after and that we knew that the surrogate was in a good place, a good environment. And that's one thing that we were assured with Addie. And when we met her, when she had birth, she was so healthy, she was so happy. The process for her as well had been quite simplistic and made, I guess the agency is the one that gets that to happen.
Yeah. It was so easy and comfortable for the surrogate that we're actually going to transfer again in October with the same surrogate.
Yeah, so we're so happy with the process, and it's good that they'll both have, I don't know if you know, but on the Thai passport the surrogate's name will be there, and Paul's the biological child, or the birth certificate I should say, and Paul's the biological child of Molly. We first tried with my sperm, they were the failed attempts, and the second time, as soon as we tried Paul once, it worked. We don't know why. So we went through lots of different scenarios, but I think it's really, really important to make sure you've got the right people looking after you when you're going through the process, because it can just be a nightmare. It can be all over the shop. Molly comes from an egg, which is from, of course, comes from a Caucasian egg, which is from South Africa. That first journey with, how many egg donors did we end up going through? 4, mainly with the first agency. The second agent was just the once. But we went through South Africa. The egg donor was half English, half Dutch. Profile and everything comes with that. It's really quite interesting shopping for the egg. But that process can get really quite messy. The first agency we went through, we ended up going through an egg retrieval place in South Africa. That was really not good. We had all sorts of things go on. We lost money. We at one point were taking legal action against the agency over in South Africa. Very, very messy place. Very, very full of people that are willing to take your money and basically screw you around at the end of the day. Every time that we had an egg donor, because obviously they have to travel from South Africa to Thailand, that always became a little bit of a hassle. The timing was never right, things were never right on. Then there was questions over, was the medication correct? Was she actually given it? At some point we were told that the hospital felt that she wasn't getting given the right medication, so the medication that, even though it had the right packaging, it wasn't actually the real medication, because it's very expensive for the medication. So trying to do it yourself is probably going to be a real nightmare, and you don't know, because you're looking on the internet, and basically you're doing an internet daily, aren't you? Because that's what you're doing. You're going on and reading blogs. Be aware that people who own these agencies go on and blog on those blogs. So they've got all these nice stories about this, and I'm so happy about them. I'm so, the one that we went through was basically she was a criminal. She was absolute, and there's other couples that we know now that are actually still chasing her legally, where at some point we had to give up that fight because, this is the end result for us. So all I could say is if we had any recommendations or suggestions is that get an agency that's going to do everything for you, and one that, and I would say just one that you can trust. That if you know people, or go with an agency that you know someone's already gone through the process and give you, realistic expectations of it. Don't shop for price. Expensive does not mean the best, and the cheapest does not mean you're getting away with exactly the same thing for no cost. That's not true either. So at the end of the day, you say you get what you pay for, but just because you might go somewhere and spend 200,000 and somewhere else it's 50, just alleviate that money aspect from it and look at the actual process. We didn't decide on America because we found that it would just be too expensive. If what happened to us with Molly happened in the US, we wouldn't have been able to get going. So, Thailand was cheaper, but it was mainly we decided because it was closer as well, wasn't it? Yeah. So, do you have anything to add to it? I'm just waffling.
Yeah, you just need to be prepared, obviously, that, in the perfect world, it will happen the first time every time, but it's not necessarily the case. It does happen for a lot of people, but obviously there's people like us that, it can take 2, 3, even 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, so the questions for you, for whoever you just choose to go with as an agency, is those things. What happens if it's not successful? What is the cost involved around that? What's the cost involved around if this happens? Come up with scenarios. If an agency is telling you, you'll be fine, it'll just, 90% of the time it happens first go, what have you, is absolute rubbish. It's not like that at all. Everyone's journey is very unique and very different, and there's lots of people that turn around and do have the first, and lucky, and it does happen the first time, and there's a lot that don't as well, more so than the other way. So we're going to wrap it up.
Thank you. We'll just wrap it up there. We're going to come back to some questions a little bit later. Adam, could you take us through your journey? It's a fairly unique journey.
A little help out here, I think, so I'll just have to ask my friend down there, how do I get to the... Oh, here we are. Run slideshow. Oh, there we are. You can tell who's not the technical one. There we are. So yes, I guess David and I are a bit of an individual case in that it is rare for gay couples to go through altruistic surrogacy, especially in New South Wales at the moment. There we are. And it is a very, it's a minefield of information. And I guess my goal for my discussion today with you is to explain to you in as much detail without boring you to tears what we actually went through. Because when we started, it was very confusing and you're like, well, how do we go about this? And so here's how we actually started. Right, where we started. So, Doug and I have been together we're now together for 22 years, but it took us 18 years to actually decide that, yep, we're going to move ahead on our paternal instincts and talk about having a baby. We'd always wanted to do it, but it always seemed too hard, and I think we weren't mature enough and we were partying too much, all that usual things like, we're getting on now, we need to start thinking about doing this. We, like many other guys, had actually looked at overseas. We had gone through the entire process of choosing a clinic in the US. We'd chosen a surrogate, we had chosen an egg donor, we had chosen our specialist, and we were basically ready to get on a plane. And we had shared this desire to go overseas with some very good friends of ours, and unbeknownst to us, they had actually discussed separately that they had always wanted to be a surrogate family for someone. And so they called us one day and they said, guys, this is crazy that you're going overseas, let us be your surrogate family. It's like, you want to do what? Are you crazy? And so once we picked ourselves off the floor, and we had many heartfelt discussions with them, and we decided that yes, it was a wonderful thing for us to go on this journey together, that we started the process in Sydney. And so after all the research we'd been through, working out how do we do it overseas, like, oh my God, now I've got to start again, hands in the air, panic moment. And so we thought we've got to do this step by step, just like a recipe. And so we've got to make sure that we just follow it logically. And so we came up with the list. So we had an oven, tick, great. We had the sperm, tick, great. Oh, we need eggs. How do we get through this? And so we decided to go through eggdonationaustralia.com.au, and we actually were in contact with a couple of wonderful women who offered to donate their eggs to us, but we felt the best connection with the lovely lady from Adelaide, and age was on her side. She was a 22-year-old lady who already had a girl of her own, and so we thought, she's wonderful. We connected with her on lots of levels, and so we decided to invite her to come onto our journey with us. And so, right, we've got the ingredients for this recipe now. We actually need to get cooking. How do we actually do this? And so, again, lots and lots of research, hands in the air. Oh, this is so confusing. What do we do? And so we decided, first step, we need to get a lawyer. And so we approached a family lawyer that we have been, with for many, many years. And so she helped us with the baking. And so she said, right, first thing, guys, you need to get your sperm checked. Is it viable for you to actually go on this journey? So, okay, yep, good thinking. And so we had our sperm checked. Then we decided to go along with the IVF clinic that our surrogate had actually been with her 2 children. And so that's where we decided to go with IVF Australia, and we went to Greenwich and met Kirsty, and she helped us on our journey. And I'll always remember the day that Dave and I turned up with a spreadsheet and said, this is how a pregnancy is going to happen. She looked at us and went, oh, it's like, you guys. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we've learned is it doesn't go to plan the way you think it's going to go to plan. You need to be flexible. And with that, we started learning about all the intricate steps that are involved in altruistic surrogacy. First of all, you need to do the first round of counselling with IVF Australia, and that was with our egg donor who came up from Adelaide with her partner. And then we had to go through the egg collection process, and then of course the fertilisation. We decided to actually split the eggs, so we got a number of eggs and we split them and we fertilised half with David's sperm and half with my sperm. And the legislation said, or actually, Kirsten might be able to correct me, Jonathan's legislation of the IVF, if that's their particular guidelines, that you quarantine the embryos for 3 months, and that's to protect the surrogate because you take bloods before and bloods after, and it's to make sure that there's nothing going to crop up in between. Then once we'd actually been through that, then we had to find an independent counsellor to actually go with our surrogate family. And that's quite a confronting process when you think you know everything. You've been through the list with your surrogate and her husband, and you think you've covered all of the options, and the counsellor comes along and says, right, well, what if this happens? What if there's genetic defects? What if there's a miscarriage? How soon will you go again? And all of these things that I won't bore you with now, but it's really important that you go through that counselling process, because it does help concrete in your mind all the what ifs, and that's so valuable for the future. So that was the second round of counselling. You do it solo. You have a personality profile report done on you, and that in itself is quite interesting. It's like, oh, you think I'm controlling? Why do you think that? And then the surrogate and her husband have their counselling, and then we go through it again together. Then we go through a third round of counselling, and that is to talk about the results of the profiles that came up in the previous round. Then we needed to appoint lawyers that are separate to our lawyers for the surrogate's family. So you can see already there's all these moving pieces, and if you don't have a clear head of making sure that you've got everything covered, then you risk, particularly with the legislation in New South Wales, when you go to the family court, that all the boxes haven't been ticked. And because it's relatively new legislation, if everything isn't ticked off, they're sticklers for process, and it's like, well, you didn't do things in a particular order. You may risk actually the parenting orders not going through, or there being difficulties later on. And so just make sure you understand the process from your lawyers. It's really important. Okay, so there's more list. I'll try and keep this brief. Preparation of the surrogacy arrangement document. So it's interesting that it's not actually a legally binding document. It's an arrangement, it's not a contract. but it is an understanding of where you stand, and that the surrogate and her husband understand that after the baby is born, that the baby is going to be given up straight to you, and the baby will be put into your care, that you'll be present in the birthing suite, that who's going to hold the baby first, what's going to happen in the event of an emergency, what happens if a seizure happens, how will compensation for any costs incurred during the pregnancy happen. Even though you don't pay for the pregnancy itself, you've got to cover the costs such as the medications and clothes. You've got to pay for her expanding waistline, and you can't pay for anything that's seen as over and above. But you've got to make sure that there's a spreadsheet and that it's all ticked off, because that goes towards the family court later on as well. We went through 2 cycles. Oh, sorry, the little point there, the signing of the surrogacy arrangement needs to happen before you get pregnant. Don't let it happen after you get pregnant, because it's not in the list of order that it says in the legislation. So make sure that it happens in the right order. We went through 1 IVF cycle, and unfortunately that didn't take. But with the second IVF cycle, and we were very lucky, as you were saying before, it can have to take 4, 5, 6 times. We were lucky with just 2. And so successful pregnancy, hands in the air, yay, for a whole different reason. And then 38 weeks later, our chicken is done. And, I could take you through the emotional ups and downs of that time frame. And believe me, it is an emotional roller coaster, when you're concerned about how your surrogate is feeling, it's not as easy, it wasn't as easy for her as with her first 2 pregnancies, so that was emotional. But then that's why it's really important to go to the post-birth surrogacy psychological assessment. Again, that's under the legislation. I was thinking, why are we going to, psychological assessment after the birth? Isn't that too late? But it's actually really valuable to get an understanding of how you feel about being a new parent, about hearing how your surrogate feels, and is she coping with having been through this emotional and physical journey, and is she getting enough support? Have you given her enough support afterwards? And one of the other days previously talked about I think it was the cuddle attack, which is so true. If your surrogate is feeling down or she's having that separation anxiety, you've got to be open and available for her to come to you and just, here, take Maya for half an hour, give her cuddles, give her kisses, and it gives her the sense of that's what this was for. And in all of the journey, it certainly made our relationship with our surrogate stronger, and her husband stronger. I mean, he was just as much of an angel as she was. And then the last step was the application to the family court for parenting orders. So we've actually put in our application. It hasn't been finalised yet, but the paperwork's in, and so fingers crossed in a few weeks, the birth certificate will be changed to have David's and my name on the birth certificate as parent 1 and parent 2, because at the time of birth, it's actually the surrogate and her husband who are noted as mother and father on the birth certificate. So you might say, why do you need the parenting orders? Well, for us, it's an emotional thing for us, almost a proof, I don't know, that we really wanted that. Some people decide not to do that, and that's their decision. But if you do want to go for the parenting orders, that it's really important that you go through each of those steps in order, so that when it goes to the court, they can see that you followed the law to the T.
Just to touch on that, what the parenting orders that Adam is going to get, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, making and his partner the legal parents in Australia for that child. A parenting order that has been talked about a lot today is not the same thing. Similar, but it's not the same thing. This will make them parents for life. As a parenting order, only makes you, gives you parenting rights for 18 years.
Yes. Yep. I should have slowed down. Okay. Now, obviously, everybody's story is different and everybody's requirements are different, so please don't take these numbers verbatim and say, oh, that's how much it costs to make a baby in New South Wales. This is what it cost us. And I really wanted to put this up here because it was a big question for us at the beginning. How much do we have to budget? Do we have to sell a kidney to be able to afford a baby? All in all, every cent is worth it. And yes, it's been challenging, and yes, you think, oh, you know, here's another bill, you know, it's more medications we've got to pay for, more counselling we've got to pay for. And I know that our journey has been nowhere near as expensive as families who go overseas. But whatever journey you choose, I think you always find a way and a justification to pay for it. So please, whatever your journey, don't let cost be an issue. You will find a way. There's no cost on having a baby join you in your life. You can't put a price on that. So I just wanted to put those there. I do have details of further breakdown if other guys are interested in, so I can give you a bit more breakdown later on if you like. And the takeaway is it all looks big, but it is just a series of steps. Take it one step at a time. Don't be overwhelmed by the mountain of information. Treat it like a recipe. You know, it's like, okay, got the ingredients, yes. Have I got the, you know, the recipe list, the method? Ask for help. Get good personal support. Get family support. Get good legal support right from the beginning. I can't emphasise that enough. And be patient. Don't go into it with a spreadsheet like we did and a Gantt chart and go, right, here's our expected due date. But you don't have an egg yet. That doesn't matter. We're going to have a baby on this date. You know, not going to happen. So be patient. And most importantly, if you're really up in the air about do we do this, don't we do this, please take the first step. It's worth the step. Once you take the first step, it'll all just follow on. And that's the results of our journey. So that's Maya. She's 6 months old now, and we couldn't be prouder. Thank you for listening.
I'd like to welcome Giles, and Giles has 4 children. He has had 3 different surrogacy journeys. So Giles, please talk us through them.
Yes, so I hope I don't repeat too much of what I said earlier on this morning during the other session. Yes, so I've got 4 kids through surrogacy and 3 separate surrogacies. I think what's probably unique about my situation is all 4 children were conceived from the same single egg donation back in 2005. So we've been really very lucky in that respect. I'll come back to that. So our surrogacy journey probably maybe started a bit like yours when I first met my partner in 2001, and on our first date I told him about a gay couple that I knew who had had twins through surrogacy in the United States, and that became our plan from the first date, that that's what we were going to do. So 2.5 years later, it was 2004, John Howard was in power, and we started to get very nervous because he was particularly unfriendly towards our kind, and we thought that the window of opportunity might close for surrogacy. So we decided to get started earlier than probably we were ready to, but we went over to the US and met with a few surrogacy agencies. We met with 2 of them at the time. And we also met with our fertility doctor, who was Guy Ringberg, who was sitting here before. I'm disappointed that he's left because I really want to sing his praises. I'm not going to get any credit for it whatsoever. But I think, you know, we didn't do everything right in our surrogacy journey, but one of the things we did do was that we found we took a recommendation on a fertility doctor, and he was quite separate to the clinic. So he was really our advocate, and that really came back, that was really very valuable for us. And also, when we were at the clinic that day, and when we met him and we did our deposit, we were also asked by a random person in the waiting room if they would, who would be their sperm donor. That never transpired into anything, but it was very flattering all the same. So we came back from America, and we chose the agency that we were going to work with. And as I said this morning, our one stipulation with the agency was that we wanted a California-based surrogate, because certainly at that time we could then have both men on the birth certificate. There may have been other places at the time, but certainly that was the case in California. And there was a lot of resistance from the surrogacy agency about that, because it was much easier, in my view, for them to match us with an out-of-state surrogate. But we stipulated that, and that's what we got. So then when it came to the matching process, we were matched with a California surrogate. She looked at our profile, she liked us, and she chose us. We then flew back to the United States again, and we met with her and her husband. So she was married, had 4 kids of her own, had always fallen pregnant very easily. We really liked her, got along like a house on fire. And so then the match was, confirmed, and then we moved on to finding an egg donor. So we eventually needed 3 egg donors before we got our recipe right. Our first egg donor, who we thought was great, we paid for her screening, she was all ready to go, and then there was a medical problem in the family, and she was out, we couldn't use her anymore. So that was $3,000 for screening, gone. It was a shock, but we moved on, so we found another girl. She was fantastic, she was actually a rocket scientist, but she was amazing. She had been a donor before. There was a little bit of a question over the results of her donation, but she had had a pregnancy as a result of that. We spoke to the fertility doctor about her, and in hindsight, I really wish we had listened to him. He wasn't particularly enthusiastic about her, but he said, she's worked before, and her other doctor said that, she should go again. So we went with her. The number of eggs was okay, but the embryo quality was very poor, and there was a transfer. She did get pregnant, but then had a miscarriage at 6 weeks. We had mixed up the sperm between David and myself, and all the embryos looked funny. So we thought there's probably an issue with the egg donor, but you never really know. Maybe there was an issue with both of us. And it was a really upsetting time, and for anyone who's had a miscarriage, it's devastating. And you think, especially when you're going through surrogacy, you think that this is never going to happen for me. I'm going to spend all this money and I'm going to walk away with nothing. So there's a lot of soul searching. There was a long period after the miscarriage before we could have another transfer, and so we had a bit of time. It was about 4 months. And we spoke to the fertility doctor again, and we said, what do you think we should do? And he said, I think you've got some remaining embryos, I think you should use them. He said, but we've lost faith in this donor, we want to have more than one kid. Do you think there'll be more than one pregnancy in there? And I said, I don't know about that, there's probably one. So we decided to look for another donor. And then we found the donor that was the right donor for us. So the donor that we eventually went with, she was in her early 20s. She fitted the bill. She was tall, gorgeous, smart, studying at a prestigious university. But the most important thing, I think, was that she was a proven donor. She had donated for 3 couples previous to us and had pregnancies every time, especially off of frozen transfers, which back then was, something of an anomaly. I think that the technology wasn't as good. When I was speaking to the fertility company about it, initially they were saying, well, no, of course everyone can't have a proven donor because people have to be chosen to become proven. But once we had the miscarriage, they were like, oh, well, I guess given what's happened, it's reasonable to go to that step now. I wish we'd stuck to our guns initially and just, I wish we'd just gone with a proven donor in the first place, but I guess that's the journey we had to go down. And I think the reason we've been so successful is because we found that donor, and she had an excellent history. When Dr. Ringler reviewed her profile, he said she was excellent. Comparing the excellent to the previous, she's all right, you really need to listen to them, and you have to remember that the fertility doctors, they work in this industry. They can't really be saying, do this, do that, because they've got to keep other people happy, and the agency's happy as well. So you really need to listen to what they say. Anyhow, so we had our egg donor donated for us. Embryos looked great, quite a few of them. We transferred 3 embryos, and we got a twin pregnancy. We were excited. We really wanted a twin pregnancy. But that was short-lived because our surrogate developed a medical problem, which meant that she was almost certainly going to deliver early. And so we knew that this was, a possibility, and she did deliver early at 32 weeks. Not too early, but early enough to spend a couple of weeks 2 months in the NICU all the same. And that was a really stressful time as a foreign overseas couple to be in this, in a medical facility in the United States, not really knowing when you were going to get out of there, not really knowing if the baby was going to be okay, although everything seemed okay, but maybe they just weren't telling you stuff. And we were struggling with the insurance at the time. The insurance has really changed since then, but the insurance company, the insurance bill is hundreds of thousands of dollars for the neonatal care, and the insurance claim was outright denied. But we had insurance. How could this be? And speaking to the nurses at the NICU, they say, oh, they always deny their claims. If it's a bit of a foreign concept for Australians, you think that your insurance will be honoured. They did eventually pay the insurance bill, but this is obviously a trick that the Americans like to try. And I guess they thought maybe we would just pay it ourselves. We didn't. Anyhow, it all worked out in the end. So it was that pregnancy was filled with lots of drama, and we had the miscarriage, and then we had the early delivery. So we really got very close with our surrogate during that journey, and as a result of it, we've got a really good ongoing relationship with her today, and we've seen her a couple of times when we've been back in California. She wasn't able to be a surrogate again because of that complication. So as much as she was in many ways a pregnancy junkie and she would love to keep going, so she was out. Then a long time passed before we did anything else. Every year we would be sent a bill for $500 for the remaining embryos that were frozen in Dr. Ringler's lab. And every year we would just pay the bill or kick the can down the road. And then a couple of years ago we thought, we're not getting any younger, we have to make a decision. What are we going to do about these embryos? And we thought, so much of the time it doesn't work, it's IVF, we're going to have to pay a lot of money to roll the dice with these embryos, but we decided we would do that one more time. And I felt there was more to the story. We went with a new agency. We wanted to try a different experience. We hadn't necessarily had a bad experience, but we wanted to try something different. So we had to have a new surrogate. And at this new agency, we chose a surrogate. And we found this girl, we really liked her, she liked us. So we rolled the dice again. They defrosted a few embryos. One of them looked great. They transferred one single embryo. Bang! Pregnant first go. Dream pregnancy, term delivery. Couldn't be easier. I remember saying to our surrogate at the end of it, wow, that was pretty easy compared to the first time. There was no drama at all. But interestingly, we don't have a very close relationship with that surrogate. And maybe we needed a bit more drama to sort of bond with her, I'm not quite sure. She, in fact, became friends with another couple in Los Angeles during our surrogacy pregnancy and then agreed to become their surrogate, so she wasn't available for another one. Anyhow, so we came home with her baby. We left the United States 7 days after our third baby was born, so you can get out of there pretty quick if you get your skates on and get your birth certificate and passport organized. But we still had some embryos left, and I still wanted to know how the story finished. We were very happy, and we never set out to have 4 kids, but we thought we would roll the dice one last time. We needed a new surrogate. This time the surrogate chose us. Anyhow, she was a lovely lady. Once again, they followed some embryos. One embryo looked great. They had a single embryo transfer. Bang, it worked again. Pregnant first time. We thought, we're getting pretty good at this. This is pretty easy. Then 2 weeks into it, at her first scan, pregnancy looked good, but there was a clot beside the pregnancy, and she started to bleed. We thought she's going to have a miscarriage again. It was a terrible, terrible time, as anyone who's been in that position will know. Getting these updates, oh, there's more bleeding, or no bleeding today, oh, more bleeding today. Our surrogate kept her cool, but of course she was nervous as well. She invested a lot in this. Anyhow, it was a really nerve-wracking time, and we would say to Dr. Renner, well, what do you think is going to happen? He said, I think it'll go away. I think it'll be fine. It did go away. It was fine. So she had a term delivery, wonderful. Everything went really well. And we've got a really, really great relationship with her, although the baby is only 2 months old, but I presume that we will have a really good ongoing relationship with her. But once again, there was a lot of drama there, and maybe that helped kind of lock us together. I think in terms of there's just a couple of take-home messages, in fact, because a couple of people have asked me, I just wanted to, it took us 2 weeks to get home after that surrogacy, and we got our birth certificate within 72 hours of the baby being born, and that's thanks to being nice and begging the local staff about that. They'll tell you it'll take 6 weeks, but they can turn these things around really quickly. So you don't have to spend a lot of time. The baby does have to be 7 days to get on the plane, so that's the minimum. I just think a couple of lessons that I've learned along the way is that there are invariably going to be problems. Very few people have these dream surrogacies where there are no issues along the way, and you have to be ready for that. And you have to budget for a few uncertainties. And when we, at the outset, we budgeted with it'll probably take us 2 egg donors. Luckily we did, because it did take us 2 egg donors to get to where we wanted to go. But you've really got to have faith in it, and most of the time it is going to work. And those numbers today were incredible. A 50% chance of getting pregnant just with a single transfer. That's amazing. So the odds are, it's not, people will say it's gambling. There's no gambling when you get 50% odds. So the odds are definitely stacked in your favor. But I think you have to be picky with who you work with. And I think you should be picky about your doctor. And I think there should be a separation with the clinic. And I think you need to be picky about your surrogate. And if something doesn't feel right, wait, be patient. Someone else will come along. And with the egg donor as well, we felt under a lot of pressure from our surrogate to find an egg donor because she was ready to go. Let's get it started. And I think we rushed and we chose poorly. You need to take your time and be really happy and really picky, especially with the egg donor, and do what's right for you, not what's right for the agency and other people. And finally, I just want to say how much easier I think it is nowadays to go through US surrogacy than it was back when we did it. The political climate has completely changed. We didn't know if we would get citizenship. We didn't know if we'd get the kids back into the country. The fertility medicine is so much better today. You're in a much better position. The insurance is a little bit more tricky than it was back then, but there's still options. And the general community acceptance and knowledge is so much better. I think the community really welcomes you with open arms, and we've had very positive experiences. So really, people are in a much better position nowadays, I think, than we were 10 years ago.
Thank you, Charles. We've come to the end of today, but before we go, if there's got any questions, I know that Paul and Shane have stepped outside with Molly, but please feel free to ask some questions. Yes?
It's actually for Paul and Shane. I just wanted to ask whether they get a parental order to bring the kids back into Australia.
We have a question for you.
Just when you guys were ready to bring
Molly.
back into Australia.
Yeah.
Did you actually have to get a parental order?
No.
No.
So it was basically, I guess the process, you look at it through Thailand, it's not actually surrogacy, so they don't sort of recognise that, so it's through descent. So Paul was the biological father, so we did blood tests in Thailand, was sent back to Australia,
Yeah.
and then they were sent back over to Thailand to confirm that he was the father, so that's how he comes back. So the surrogate remained on the birth certificate,
Yeah.
with Paul. So we can get parental orders when we get back from now we're back, for myself. The process was very simple. It was a very simplistic process, not complicated at all. The Australian side of things for the embassy was actually quite smooth. They're quite used to it in Thailand. And of course when you're with Talent, which is IVF, and they were really good, so that whole paperwork and all that process was really simplified.
I think the process has changed quite dramatically in the last 3 years.
Has it?
Yeah, I think 3 years ago it was a much more complicated process. So it's good to hear it's
The Australian embassy was really good, and they knew the process quite well. They put us in contact to have the DNA test back in Australia with the place back here, and all of that was quite straightforward as well.
Did so the like for example are there problems with is there any complications with the female surrogate being on a birth certificate? Like for example, if you need to renew the passport here in Australia, do you need to get consent or
No, you don't. All that's done. All that's already done over there. So Molly has a Thai passport and an Australian passport. So as simply as the paperwork shows, is that the surrogate is the mother of Molly, because they don't see egg donors and all that sort of thing means nothing to them. She gave birth to Molly, so therefore she's the mother, and Paul is the father. And it's as simple as that. She gives the rights for the child to come back to Australia and be with the father. And then no, it's not that complicated. Renew a passport, you just renew a passport. She has a we come back straight away, we've got Medicares, we've got everything. We did it all within a few days. We actually were quite fearful of all the paperwork, and it turned out to be a lot more simple than we thought. I think that had a lot to do with the agency too. They were telling us what to do, so that's probably why it seemed easy. Does that make sense?
yes.
Another question over here.
I was just wondering, for the people who went overseas, will your kids be able to find out who the egg donor is? We heard it earlier this afternoon.
Is that a question for me?
Young people, that it was pretty important for them to be able to know who their donor is.
Sure.
Will your kids have that opportunity?
Yeah, they do. We've got basically a letter from our egg donor that actually writes why she was actually wanting to donate. It shows all of her family history, so it goes right back to the grandfather, grandparents, great-grandparents, what they all died of, all that sort of thing. So we've got a lot of medical background and also a little bit of a brief rundown why she decided to be an egg donor. We chose an egg donor that would be open to be contacted in the future by the children. So Molly can contact her. It doesn't mean that she'll agree to it because she's only in her 20s now. So if you say 20 years' time, she might have a family and not have even spoke about that to her husband. But she's willing to speak with her because you just don't know. We're starting the process again now, so we're going for our second. Both children could be completely different. One could want to have contact with their egg donor, and the other one could not be interested at all. So we'll just have to see how it pans out. We made sure that all of our process is documented well, that we have photos of everything. We want the children to be able to see every aspect that we went through, good and bad. Even at the start, they need to know what we put into it as well. So we've thought about the children a lot, even to the point when they're back here, we can't get married and all that sort of thing. So I'm actually changing my name to my partner's last name. So therefore, the next one we're trying for the next child, which we're doing now, that will biologically be mine, and they will have the same last name. So therefore, when they're at school, they will be brother and sister. And they are in the true sense, because the egg donor is the same, the biological, the fathers are different. But with that same last name, then it makes things a lot easier, I feel, and a lot more simple. We feel more like a family that way.
Charles, what about you?
Look, in terms of the egg donor, some of the egg donors do not want to be contacted at all, and it was really important for us to choose an egg donor that was open to be contacted in the future. But I echo the same comments. You can't hold her to that, and she might change her mind. And I think it's really important for transparency for the kids to have that chance to meet her. and I hope that she, we haven't met her, and I hope that she agrees to it. Just in terms of the comment of the name as well, look, I changed my surname to my partner's surname, so we've all got the same surname. I think that some of the gay dads might think that that's a little bit odd, but from I think we wanted something traditional for a very non-traditional family, and it's been really, I think it's been a great idea. Certainly when you're travelling around the place, there's no question that these children are yours because you've all got the same name, but I think it's given our family a bit of cohesion, but not very many people are doing it. I'm surprised. I've only heard of a handful of other couples, so I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Can I just...
Oh, right, we've all done it, okay.
Can I just add one thing about the donor? It happens also in the reverse. You may have a donor who you've selected who is anonymous. It doesn't mean that you can't approach them at a later stage through the agency and ask to see whether they're willing to change their mind about being an unknown donor. We did that with our donor, and it was several years after, and she agreed that she would be open to be known to the child. So it can work both ways. But I do think if you can get a known donor, that's a great option. But it's not always possible. We had some more questions. I saw somebody's hand go up. Yes.
Paul, how old are your twins?
So that my twins are 8.
And so do they question the surrogacy? You said you've got a good relationship with her. They've obviously met her.
Absolutely, yes. So we've taken a very transparent approach to it. So we have been over. So our surrogate first met the twins again when they were 3. We all met up in Hawaii together, and we've always spoken about the surrogate. And so they met her, and also then our egg donor. We speak about her, although they haven't met her. And we're kind of part of our surrogate's family. So we've got 3 surrogates. We've got this very large extended family in Southern California, and I think it's so important for the kids to be able to meet that person. I myself didn't meet one of my parents until I was almost 20 years old, and I know what it's like to put that person up on a pedestal if you haven't met them. And I also know what it's like with the people we were talking about this afternoon about wanting to know about your origins. I think it's so important. And knowing the surrogate, she's just a lady just like anybody else, and I think it makes the whole system a great way of approaching.
Do they understand that concept that she's been the carrier?
Well, they would say that. So we've got a toddler in the house who's learning to speak, and she says, "Mum, mum, 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 mum." And one of the twins said to her the other day, "You don't have a mum." So that's how we've always explained to it. It's when you have a surrogate, and she carried you, and the egg donor, and she gave the egg, and then you got 2 dads, but there's no mum in the picture. So I think it's very clear for them. And when people ask them about their mum, like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a mum." And I think if you get that message from the very beginning, I think they've just incorporated that into who they are. And I'm sure when they're older, they might.
I think kids handle it much, much better than adults do. That's shocking. We had another question?
Yeah, just another one. I just realised. So are the kids already going to school and stuff? How old are they?
Yes, so they're in grade 2. We're the only gay family at the school. I can't believe it, but which is a little bit scary on the first day. But I don't think we're treated any differently to any of the other families, and I think it's been a great learning experience. I think for the rest of the school, and especially the fact that we keep on having children. We're the most infertile couple in the school, but we have the largest family.
That's good to know.
Have we got any more questions?
Just one thing about that term, "do I have a mum" and stuff. It's one of the things I've realised in society is that in Australia we call them surrogate mums, and the term mother has the whole connotations around of being the carer and the nurturer. And I've noticed in the USA these days they're called gestational carriers more often to get around that association with being the mother. And I think it could be important for us as our kids grow up as to how we phrase that language about what the surrogate is. And the surrogate, as you said, Giles, it's not their mum, but she was the other, the lady who carried it. How do we do it?
This is one other point I just want to raise. I think it's really important. It comes back to your question about having a relationship with the surrogate. I think that the surrogate's children often get forgotten about in this process because just like the husbands are sort of they're all involved, but they don't get a lot of attention paid to them. The surrogate's children, they remember her being pregnant, they remember this baby being born, and then the baby goes away. I think it's really important, and I think you kind of owe it to those kids to produce this baby at some point, so they can see that what happened to the baby and where it went. There are a lot of people's interests, I think, that you need to serve here, and I don't think you're doing those kids any just as if all of a sudden they never see this kid again. You want them to have a positive experience. So there are a lot of things to consider.
Yes.
Can I just give a comment about the word carrier? I think we don't have to be afraid to use the word mum and surrogate, because children can actually hold them right. I speak it from as a clinical science position. I really don't like the American terminology of carrier. It objectifies women. These women have been important to you, and children can hold separately the relationship of a woman who's helped wonderful couples to people who have mothering relationships in their home. I'm just very cautious about the word carrier. It just objectifies women.
I agree. I think there's a lot of problem with language, and we often talk about language in the absence of the context. Because when we talk about our surrogate to our child, we don't talk about it in a very blocked off space. We talk about it in terms of an experience about how this wonderful woman came into our lives to help us have the family. And so I think there's a difference between how it's talked about in public and brief settings, or when you're trying to get through a checkout at the supermarket to explain why your child has two fathers, compared to how you share that experience with your child and your surrogate shares it with her children.